I think we'll have to sue. I think we'll have to go to court in order to have these words removed. The image of Paris has been prejudiced, and the honour of Paris have been prejudiced. And I think in the great discussion of truth, everyone is to play its role, and we are going to have to be realistic and put things as they are.
Can you clarify which exact network you're going to take to court and sue?
C'est la Fox News. Voilà.
Fox News.
And that was the mayor of Paris saying she's going to sue the Fox News channel for reporting on no-go zones in Paris. But was Fox completely wrong? Well, remember this.
And this situation is like a ticking time bomb. The jobless migrant population is getting more aggressive towards the native French, which they believe to be the main cause of their troubles. This is described as anti-white racism, says Tariq Yildiz, who wrote a book about the phenomenon.
There is real lack of authority in those troubled suburbs. There is not enough police force. Criminals are not immediately punished. This phenomenon is widely spread among young people at middle school. It's mostly insulting people. A lot of insults can happen at school, at your district, as a conflict between neighbors. Sometimes it ends up in a fight.
But often it goes beyond verbal abuse. The recent murder of a French teenager by his Arabic schoolmates is just one example. A newspaper poll suggested that the white French population in Parisian slums were afraid to take a metro ride home after dark.
Wouldn't you be? In his latest book by Mark Steyn called The Undocumented Mark Steyn, the author talks about the growing Muslim population, saying, quote, Islam is currently the biggest supplier of new Canadians, and it is of new Britons and new Europeans. A world that becomes more Muslim becomes less everything else. Mark Steyn joins me now in studio. Mark, great to see you. Yeah. We always make distinctions between moderate Muslims, liberal Muslims, and the radical Muslims. But at the end of the day, the book itself, the Quran itself, is a document that prescribes violence and war in certain cases. And so the extremist always has the proof in his hands.
Yes, the wealthiest Muslim nation on the planet, Saudi Arabia, has a big sword in its flag under the word Allah, which suggests that as far as the House of Saud sees it, there is a connection between Islam and advancing Islam's cause through the sword. With those no-go zones, you talked about moderate Islam and extreme Islam. In Malmo, in Sweden, for example, moderate Islam is the countries those ladies came from when they didn't have to go covered, back in their Muslim countries in Central Asia and the Balkans, whatever. They moved to the Muslim ghetto in Rosengård in Malmo, and they have to go covered. That's the law. You can have people 50 years ago, 60 years ago, a Pakistani immigrant who came from a school at the twilight of British India and went to Scotland would have received, largely speaking, the same education as the kids in Scotland did. Now, in modern Britain, those children are educated in supposedly state schools that come under the British Department of Education, but in fact are Sharia schools using British taxpayer money to give those children an exclusively Islamic compliant education.
And the thing is, I mean, Islam is Islam. It is the literal text of what it is. It has not gone through a Reformation or an Enlightenment, so it may be the fact that 80 or 90% of Muslims themselves prefer to live a liberal life. Certainly they prefer to live in the West. But the vanguard, the ones pushing for the Sharia zones, the ones pushing for concessions for, literally in Ontario, who were trying to get Sharia law, the ones who are the violent ones at protests, like in my own city of Calgary, if it's 10 or 15% in a country like Canada with 1.3 million Muslims, that's still enormous, and that's enough to push the whole fulcrum of the country.
Yeah, I think that's true. If you go back to Quebec at the time Monsieur Trudeau declared his state of emergency a little over 40 years ago, it wasn't a few. It wasn't a lot of people, it was just a few troublemakers, but they caused a lot of trouble. At the height of the so-called Troubles in Northern Ireland, It was actually just a few dozen IRA guys whose names were all known to the authorities. But they caused an awful lot of trouble. And the issue here is that this is on a global scale, and Islam has become the kind of coolest gang on the planet. That doesn't matter whether you're a Canadian who signed up to go head-chopping his way through the Syrian and Iraqi desert with ISIS, or someone who just wants to self-radicalize by running over a guy in Saint-Jean-sur-Richelieu or putting a bullet through a soldier in Ottawa. It's the coolest gang in the planet. And in that sense, the comparisons, I think, are less to do with religion and religious reformation and more to do with a kind of gang mentality that is rooted in holy texts. How much more powerful is that than the Crips and Bloods? A gang that's rooted in holy texts.
And more than that, a gang, okay, maybe you sneak a little handgun and take a few pop, pop. ISIS, well, you can have an AK-47 or rocket launcher. Right. A gang, you're macho and sexy. ISIS, they'll give you a rape slave as a prize, and you don't have to be on the down low about it because their imams bless it. And, gangs may have a racial undertone of fighting whitey. Well, the Islamic State, let's actually behead a guy on TV. So and camaraderie. I mean, anything a gang can offer, the Islamic State can offer to the power of 10.
Yeah, and I think we shouldn't underestimate how it has a more seductive appeal than early 21st century Western society. I mean, everyone remembers that shocking picture of the fellow who'd from a Sydney suburb who goes over to fight for ISIS, and he gives his 7-year-old boy the head he's just cut off, and the 7-year-old boy holds it up on camera. These guys are our cousins in our sister dominion on the other side of the world. They have had exactly the same upbringing, more or less, as you have, and it wasn't strong enough. So they nominally carry a passport just like yours, and they claim to be citizens of a functioning Western society. But there's a big hole in their heart, and the Islamic State and similar groups come in and fill up that hole.
And we don't push back because we liberals, postmodern liberals, always take the side of the other.
Right.
Oh, well, they're Muslim. Oh, they're visible minorities. Oh, they speak with an accent. Oh, they're immigrants.
No.
Oh, they're poor. Oh, there's racism. So we always take the other side. I mean, not even before the Australian terrorist hostage-taking at that cafe was done, not even before the shootings in Paris were done, there was always, uh-oh, what will the Islamophobic backlash be when we're done slaughtering all these real Jews? I hate to see what the Jews are going to say about Muslims. I mean, Anne Frank, oh boy, the Nazis are going to get so many dirty looks for killing Anne Frank. You know, I mean, it's opposite day. But let me get back to how we started. Anne Hidalgo, the mayor of Paris, suing. To her, you can't talk about the no-go zones in Paris. She would rather sue you. David Cameron said he spat out his porridge when he heard about no-go zones in Birmingham. But the fact is, those are increasingly no-go zones, if not for the cops, for Jews, for example, for secular people, for women who don't want to wear the hijab. And unlike when Spanish King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella kicked out the Muslims in 1492, unlike when the Poles drove the Muslims out of Vienna in 1683, these folks aren't leaving. It's like a one-way ratchet.
Yeah, and David Cameron well knows that the Muslim community refers to the Islamic Republic of Tower Hamlets in the East End of London, and that on Holocaust Memorial Day a couple of years ago, a Canadian tourist and an American tourist got stoned. They were touring the old Jewish East End, which is now a certain other kind of East End. They got stoned, wound up in hospital on Holocaust Memorial Day. It's the same thing in France. It's the same thing in Sweden. There's a magnificent line in Michel Houellebecq's new novel, Submission, about a Muslim who gets elected president of France. And this French guy is dating a Jewish girl. And the Jewish girl at one point, he's like the classic French novelist character. He's a decadent, debauched, middle-aged sex fiend. And he's dating the cute Jewish girl. And at one point, the cute Jewish girl decides she's got to get out and she's going to go to Israel. And the And the middle-aged French sex fiend says bleakly, in the most powerful line in the novel, as it dawns on him, he goes, "There is no Israel for me." And those French people and British people and all the others who turned a blind eye to the Jew bashing in Europe don't realize that it starts with the Jews, but it never ends there. And it will go for women and gays and eventually everyone.
You know what? Perhaps it's a displaced guilt for what happened 75 years ago in the Holocaust. Europe has traded 6 million Jews for 20 million Muslims. Right. And they're not leaving. Even Marine Le Pen of the Front National, the hardest line leader in France, doesn't talk about deporting or she just says you can't bail it out, just stop more radicals from coming in. France will never be the old France again.
No, you can't tell who are the radicals. I mean, you go back to 75 years ago. My grandparents' generation, my maternal grandparents were Belgian. That generation in the 1930s would never have entertained for a moment the construction of mosques from Malmo to Marseille. But the great paradox of history is that Holocaust guilt enabled the Islamization of Europe because they drew the wrong conclusion and they turned against nationalism, and they decided that the lesson of Hitler and Mussolini was that nationalism and national identity was bad. And so they have seeded in the heart of some of the oldest nation states in the world a force that will eventually transform those countries beyond recognition.
Mark Steyn, it's great to have you here. What I hope is that Canada will learn the lessons of France, the Netherlands, Sweden, and the UK. That we'll always have a Canada to go to because it'll still be one we recognize.
I hope so too, Ezra.
Thanks for being here, my friend. More Source coming up.